Welcome to Experiments in Leadership. I am Sonu Bhasin. Experiments in Leadership is a space where industry leaders share their thoughts and stories about various facets of leadership. But before I introduce my guest today, I do want to urge all of you to subscribe to my channel. It's good content, free of cost. Good deal, according to me. Right? And back to my guest of the day today. So Rajeev Dubey is the TAS batch of 1975. He joined TISCO, which is now Tata Steel, after his probationary period and then stayed on there for almost 20 years, except for the 2-year sabbatical to do his MBA at Yale. He was the managing director of Tata Metaliks, and he became the managing director in 96. And after, I think, 4 years, he was named the managing director of Rallis India. After he left the Tata Group, Rajeev joined the Mahindra Group and was part of the Group Executive Board, besides being the Group President, HR and Corporate Services, and CEO of the aftermarket sector. And if you thought that after retirement, Rajeev is, fulfilling his dreams of being an academic, you couldn't be more wrong. He is currently a member of the governing board of the ILO, the International Labour Organization, Geneva, and he continues to be the chairman of 3 Mahindra companies. So got quite his hands full, and we are extremely lucky that we caught him before he toodled off to Geneva for his meetings at the ILO. So welcome to Experiments in Leadership, Rajeev, and looking forward to the conversation with you.
Delighted and privileged to be here.
Let's just get on straight with the conversation. So you spent 20 years at TISCO when Rusi Modi was heading it. Now we all...
both Rusi Modi and then towards the 93 there was a change, and Jamshed Irani, I think maybe 92, Jamshed Irani came in. So I was several years under Jamshed Irani.
Yeah, but you joined TISCO when Rusi Modi was firmly in charge.
I was his executive assistant. My first job was as Rusi Modi's executive assistant or assistant bottle washer, however you know.
But the question that I have is that we all know that Rusi Modi was not quite enamored by the TAS types. So with this, when you knew this, how and why did you join TISCO? And also then you say that you were the executive assistant to the great man himself.
Yeah, well, life is strange. When I joined the TAS, initially I was sort of very, very depressed. I had grown up in Delhi. I'd studied, Marxist economics, and
at St. Stephen's College.
St. Stephen's, Delhi School of Economics, and Delhi School was not so Marxist. St. Stephen's was.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a huge culture shock for me. And then I was surrounded by all the IIM, IIT types who were only talking in those days MBO and
Yeah.
And so I first thought I must leave the TAS and get out. Then one day I had a dream that there is a guy called Rusi Modi who I had never met in a place called Jamshedpur, which is all hills and rivers and all that. So I said, if I can get an assignment as Rusi Modi's executive assistant posted in Jamshedpur, then I will stay. Otherwise, I'll leave the TAS. So that was my firm decision. So I went to the TAS secretariat. I said, look, can you guys send me to Jamshedpur and get me a meeting with Rusi Modi? And, they said, look, are you mad? Can't stand the sight of TAS people. He has his own MAS.
MAS, yeah.
Anyways, I never have listened much to advice in my life, fortunately or unfortunately. So I said, I'll take my chance. Somehow I managed through one of our own TAS officers, Vinayak Namjoshi. He was a batchmate of Aditya Kashyap, who was the executive assistant to Rusi Modi.
Yeah.
And I requested Vinayak, look, can you tell Aditya Kashyap, I just want to meet Mr. Modi once. So I got a meeting, and for me, it was a do or die kind of a meeting. So it started off very interestingly. The first question Rusi Modi posed to me was, why do you have a beard? So,
you've had a beard for as long as that.
Yeah. I grew it first for a play in St. Stephen's College. I grew it, I think, for Hamlet. I wasn't Hamlet, I was Claudius.
Okay.
Could have been Hamlet, but I was Claudius. I had grown a beard for that. And, I rather sort of could stand my face with the beard. Otherwise, I had a tough time accepting myself. So anyway, so it started off with that. And then we spoke for half an hour about everything under the sun. And then he says suddenly, okay, so why did you come to meet me? So I said, because I want to work for you. So he said, that's very interesting. And what do you want to work as? I said, as your executive assistant. So he started laughing. He said, but I already have an executive assistant. And why would I want you? So I said, that's okay. But, if you don't give me executive assistant, then, I'm not going to. So he looked at me for about 30 seconds, or maybe it was 40 seconds. I don't know. And then he said, okay, done.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. And then, of course, I had to finish my probationary period. And then I had 6 months of, training in the steel plant. And one of his conditions was that, you don't ever come to my office for 6 months, and don't you dare use a car. You TAS types get a car. In those days, we used to get a chauffeur-driven car to pick us up and all that. It was very bad. Yeah, it was very colonial. And anyway, so that was his condition. And it was a great thing because I was living quite far off in the Kaiser colony, and I used to start walking from there. And some kind person used to stop. So, either it could be a general foreman, or it could be a superintendent of a plant. I made Hajar friends just because I was walking, and they'd see this Dadi wala fellow wearing a Panama hat walking in the sun. So they would stop and they say, where are you going? And, I'd say, I'm going to, I don't know, sheet mill or RM1 or RM2 or something like that. So it was quite an experience working with Rusi. I learned a hell of a lot.
Yeah, so we'll talk about what did you learn, but the fact that we all knew that Rusi Modi wasn't very keen on TS people, and also people who did join him or TISCO were told very clearly that, don't think of yourself as a TS person. You are now firmly a Rusi Modi person. So that brings me to this question of what a lot of us professionals face: institutional loyalty versus personal loyalty. The TS was all about institutional loyalty. I mean, you owed your allegiance to the Tata Group. But when you were part of one of the satraps, Rusi Modi was one of them, you had to owe your allegiance to the individual. So what are your thoughts, having spent so many years, working with various leaders and being a leader yourself? How do you, or what advice or what gyan can you give about institutional loyalty versus personal loyalty for professionals?
Look, for me, it was always loyalty to a purpose and a cause. Okay. And if the individual happened to have views that were aligned with my view of life, then there was no conflict. But if there was ever a conflict, I was totally clear that my allegiance was to the cause, or to the purpose, or if you like, to the institution. But again, it all depends on how the institution is run. So that's why I'm not using the word institution. I'm using the word cause or a purpose. And so with Rusi Modi, when I was working directly with him, there wasn't too much of conflict. I couldn't see that. But yes, towards the end, actually, there was, as you know, a huge sort of conflict where it was Rusi Modi versus Tata. And I was very clear where my allegiance lay. It was a very difficult situation. I was the chief resident executive of Tata Steel in Delhi. And Delhi was pretty much involved in what happened. But I must say, to the credit of both Rusi Modi and, Bombay House, I was never put in a situation where I had to make moral choices. A lot of the stuff in Delhi was done by them directly. So neither side actually involved me. But I'm very clear where my loyalty lay.
And so is this something that you would, advise the young professionals out there, that choose your loyalty and make it for a purpose rather than a person?
Yeah, without any doubt. They need not be in conflict.
Yeah.
They can be aligned, which is a good situation. But if there is a conflict between loyalty to your boss versus loyalty to the cause or purpose or institution, if the three are aligned, then
Yeah.
I'm totally clear where my loyalty would be. And I would advise people the same thing.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
true to yourself.
Yeah.
As Shakespeare would have said, to thine own self be true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, before we get to the experiments that worked for you and the experiment that did not, I've often wondered, and I'm getting an opportunity to ask you, so therefore I will, that you worked in one solid group, which is the Tata Group, and then you went to another solid group, which is the Mahindra Group. So, did you see any common values? And did you see any different values? And if you can talk about them briefly.
So I think there were a lot of common values, commitment to the truth, very high levels of governance, of ethics, of actually giving up profit to honor your commitments and things of that kind. So there was a lot of commonality from that
Yeah.
point. The difference was that I found the Mahindras compared to the Tatas I had experienced. And you have to also remember that I joined Tatas pretty much, as I said, as an assistant bottle washer, and I had to make my way up. Whereas Mahindras, I joined right at the,
You had many bottle washers for you.
no. I used to wash my own bottles, but I joined as a member of the then group management board, and my
Right.
boss was Anand Mahindra. So
Yeah.
that may have colored my perception, but I found the Mahindras more entrepreneurial, greater hunger in the belly to make a difference and to find a place under the sun, because the Mahindras that I joined were much, much smaller than the Tatas. And, they,
And less old, I mean, younger.
and younger, yeah. The
Yeah.
Mahindras were founded in 1945.
Hmm.
Mahindras were founded in the 1800s, right?
Yeah.
1800 and something, the old textile mills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and I had completely direct access to Anand. I could pick up the phone or send him a message and he would reply immediately. And both he and Mr. Keshav Mahindra, of course, my dealing was more with Anand. With them, one could talk totally frankly. They were not judgmental. I didn't have to watch too much my words. I could express. I could even have differences of opinion, but without being worried. But in the Tatas, I found that I actually paid a very heavy price for daring to disagree.
With the powers that be.
With the powers that be. I mean, maybe I'm not being fair, but yeah, that was my perception. Maybe it was also luck, who knows? I mean, when I look at my own life,
Yeah.
there are many things that happened which I cannot really explain. And so I have attributed to this word called, or the phrase called karmic destiny. Now, whatever that may mean, that's maybe a different discussion.
No, that would be a separate discussion. Okay, so now let's talk about an experiment in leadership that worked for you. Unless you want to start with one that didn't.
I mean, have it your way, because
Let's start.
The conclusion I'm going to come to is very interesting. So,
Okay, so let's start
with one that worked.
let's start with the one that worked.
So I would say that the one, and nothing actually fully works, and nothing ever fully doesn't work. So that's the first thing. In every situation, there are many things that work, some things that don't work. And depending on your definition of overall, did it work or did it not work, we would choose different incidents to give as examples. But let me take what by common understanding worked, which was my 4-year stint at Tata Metaliks.
Right.
I went in, it was a loss-making company. When I came out, it was making profit. And clearly that had something to do with my being considered for being the CEO of a company that was 11 times larger in terms of revenue and stuff like that, which was Rallies. So
Yeah.
so there must have been something that happened, or something that was perceived as having been done rightly in Tata Metaliks. Now, what happened in Tata Metaliks? What was the template? So I went in there. Why am I here? what is the purpose for which I'm here? Uh, who are my stakeholders? What are their voices? So what are the key questions that we have to address? How do we address those questions? So, why, what, how, then when, where. And my approach always has been uh, a person who would like to focus on identifying the key questions and then co-creating the answers with my team.
Right.
So that basically was my approach. Also, oftentimes I would take risk. I mean, not crazy risk, but risk. I mean, you never know, is it going to be right? Is it going to be wrong? And I think maybe this is my weakness, that I didn't always agree with my boss. Now, I would say that in Tata Metaliks, I had a relatively free hand. I had a supportive super boss, that was Jamshed Irani. I did have issues with the chairman of Tata Metaliks. In fact, it also reached a level where I was not very sure what was going to happen because of my disagreement with that guy. But I had a super boss who sort of saw the world the way I did, and I was okay. I managed that. I go into Rallies. Now I have to come back to Rallies, and then we can go back and
Yeah.
forth. And I followed roughly the same approach, why, what, how, and then, focusing on the questions, co-creating. And so, but in Rallies, the difference was the information that was available to me was very uncertain, was often wrong.
I see.
The accounts were not in a proper order. In fact, the statutory auditors had been asked to go. And a
Right.
new set of statutory auditors came in with this new CEO. So clearly, there was a huge problem of information.
Right.
What is the level of receivables? How much of your plant and machinery that is there on paper is there? Stocks that are being shown, are they expired, not expired? All kinds of issues. So much so that they didn't even know accurately the cash in transit at the end of the day, right? So
Right.
this is quite a major issue.
Right.
So one was that I was working with information that was not very reliable and not very accurate. Secondly, I think I did not read the human dynamics of the situation very well, especially at the board level. I must admit that was my mistake, that I didn't spend enough time uh, understanding the dynamics, if you like, or the relationships
Right.
that were operating at the board level, especially at the level of the chairman. Also, I have to take responsibility for the fact that, and I must say, maybe it was my ego, but I thought that as the CEO, I was the boss. I made that assumption. Maybe it was a wrong assumption. It was an assumption that was mostly okay when I was in Tata Metaliks.
Right.
I had a huge amount of freedom and I exercised it. Here, I made that same assumption, and maybe that was not a correct assumption. Maybe I had a chairman who, wanted to have far more control. Or was what it was. So I think it was this mix of information, my inability to understand, if you like, the dynamics, both at the board level, and especially, with one or two people on the board, my own ego. I am the boss, and why should somebody tell me which nostril to breathe in from and which to breathe out from? And then I think in my own team, there were some people who turned out to be highly unreliable, and I don't want to mention names or positions. So this is my perception.
Right.
Now, purely in terms of numbers, I think I did a damn good job. It was a huge turnout. We made lots of cash profit. Large numbers of businesses had to be closed. There was rationalization of all kinds. And it was a very difficult and traumatic thing, and managing it without proper information. And then in my third year, and frankly, I don't know whether you were there with the Tatas at that time.
No, I wasn't.
So mostly people thought I was doing a good job.
Acha.
Yeah, yeah, they used to come and ask me. I have made presentations on turnarounds in the group CEO, whatever it was called. I forget. The Tata group used to meet, and I would say it's too early. I mean, I'm not a magician. It's still work in progress. But here is what it is, and Tata. They used to have those magazines, and they would feature me there, and
I see.
all that kind of thing. And I remember saying to myself that this is wrong. I mean, you can't talk about turning around something that was as old and with as many sort of fault lines as Rallies in 2 years or 3 years. It's going to take more time. And also the fact that I had to get a lot of people out, that really, and I remember saying to myself, God is going to punish me for this. And
Yeah.
in my third year, we had to provision. Right? And that amount of provisioning, now this was one thing that I did not, I think, warn the board sufficiently.
Right.
I mean, I would always give a figure without the provisioning. I would say, this is what it is. We don't know what the provisioning will be. And frankly, the figure of provisioning was a moving figure. It kept on changing. On the last day on the board meeting, the auditors added 30 crores.
Yeah.
And then there was much more provisioning that we couldn't do, because otherwise this company would have gone into BIFR. Now, somebody could have said, why did you not do the provisioning earlier when you were showing huge profit?
Right.
Huge cash profit. Now, the answer to that is that you can't do provisioning on your whim.
Whims. Yeah.
You're accused of, avoiding tax or evading tax.
Right.
But there is a certain process that had to be. Anyway, long and the short of it is that despite having cash profit, the company showed a loss of 100 crores, because that was all the provisioning, and there was another 80 crores of provisioning that had to be done after that. And I think the board, in its wisdom, and the new chairman in his wisdom, felt that I needed to take responsibility. I argued that what do you mean take responsibility? Because, even if I had worked day and night, I could not have created so much of provisioning. I mean, this provisioning is more than 10 times the cumulative profit that this company has shown over a decade.
Right.
So, so I don't think it's fair to hold me responsible. And the answer I was given was that when there is a train crash, the railway minister has to take responsibility. It was a situation where I had no choice but to put in my resignation, and I cannot say that I left with the best of feelings for certain people. But what at one time seemed a disaster, and I think I also went into the victim mode for some time, and it needed my father to give me some good advice, and to say that don't be the victim, be the cause. Remember that you are the cause, and now shape your life. I mean, I think it was a huge learning for me, both in terms of leadership and in terms of my own sort of interpretation of life. And then, of course, I think perhaps one of the best periods of my life started, which was with the Mahindra. So overall, what changed? I followed the same approach each time, but I think it was this mix of information, dynamics at the board level, relationships with bosses, those three things, the kind of communication that took place, those things, I think, was the difference between so-called success and so-called failure. Now, one can argue which one was success and which one was
failure.
No, am I making any sense?
No, I mean, thank you for sharing, these details with all of us. So Rajiv, we always say, उसको देखो इतना successful है, उससे कुछ सीखो. मगर when people experience failure, in your opinion, are there any learnings from it? And also, how can people emerge stronger? Because life doesn't end because you made a mistake. I mean, unless that mistake is that you take a gun and shoot yourself. But how do you recover from that? How did you recover from that? What helped you? Because today we hear of layoffs, we hear of, no certainty of any job. So, how can people deal with this? I mean, that sense of inadequacy that comes from within.
So, I mean, I went through all this in very, very sort of very, very sharp form, right? Because I had only experienced success in my
That's still
life.
then, yeah.
And then this came. But my learning was that if you actually haven't experienced failure, you will never really be successful, right? No matter how you define success. So I think we have to take it for granted that there will be failure, that there will be failure, and we must embrace failure and learn from it. In fact, in the new normal, which is, as you know, VUCA or BANI, whatever you want to call it, with pushback and interconnectedness, one of the key requirements of a leader is to know how to manage fear and leverage failure. Because failure will be there. The best way to avoid failure is to do nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
It is a failure by itself.
yeah.
But the knowledge that you get from failing, how your relationships are tested when you fail.
Right.
I mean, failure could be one of the best things that could ever happen to a person, provided the person learns from it a little bit and does not sink into that pit. I'm useless. Because the truth is, and this is what my father told me, he said that, look, do you think that success or failure is only because of what you do and only because of your competence? That's not true. Because in any situation, there are many forces that are acting, many forces that are totally beyond your control, and many forces that you're not even aware of. So why do you want to, feel that you're useless and that you're no good? And the other way around, that if you succeed, to think, oh, I'm God's gift to mankind.
Yeah.
Either is true. So you have to see, and my own experience of life is, and I mean, this may sound a little esoteric, that life is life in any aspect, at any level, personal, professional, global, local. Two things happen. Number one is that there is a coexistence of opposites at any time. If there is light, there has to be darkness.
Right.
If there is sorrow, at the same time, there is joy.
Joy.
So these and then the fact. So number one is the coexistence of opposites or polarities, and the second one is cycles.
Right. Right.
Downs, ups and downs, and they happen. I have not met a single person, Sonu,
Yeah.
who hasn't experienced success and who hasn't experienced failure, who hasn't experienced joy and who hasn't experienced great pain. I have never met anybody like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to just take it for granted, and then the choice is, do I learn from failure? Because failure at some stage is inevitable. And in fact, should I not welcome failure because it is a great teacher?
Yeah.
And failure actually says that I tried something. Yes, I failed. So what matters then is not that I failed, but what I learned from my failure. Can I use the learning from failure to sort of pave the path to success? But that's what life is all about. That's what innovation is all about. If you look at the sort of process of innovation, what is innovation? You try something. By definition, when you're experimenting and taking risks, 50% of the time you must fail. And when you fail, can you fail quick and fail cheap? Learn, so quick feedback loop, and then try again, and then try again. That has to be the model for innovation.
Yeah.
And innovation is going to be the key for any kind of creation of value, no matter how you define value, and no matter whether you're talking at a personal level or at an organizational level. So this business about failure and how to deal with it and how to learn from it has to be a key element for all people, whether they want to call themselves leaders. And I don't know what the word leader means. And to me, anybody who has even one person looking up to them for guidance is a leader.
Yeah.
So all of us have to know, have to understand and reflect upon how do we deal with this thing called failure. Very good question you asked. Thank you.
But I mean, at a philosophical level and at an actionable level, I think all that you have said and shared with us just makes so much of sense. And I wish that, or maybe not a wish, but maybe we'll do this another time where we will talk about more aspects of leadership. But I do want to thank you, Rajeev, for your time. I know that you did take time out for this. And viewers, we will have more conversations here. So watch this space. And till then, cheerio.